G'day, everybody. Jason and Jono here. What are we doing?
We are today, so we've done a few answering videos, rebuttals, if you
Yeah.
like, towards 119. 2 weeks ago, the host of New2Torah, which many of you are probably familiar with.
Wait, you number 2, Torah. Like what you did there, Zach? That's it. Zachary Bauer is the chap behind New2Torah. Is it New2Torah.org or I don't know what it is, or .com? I don't know.
Yes, it's one of them.
It's one of those. That's his website. Recently released a video entitled "Is Yeshua God?" Part 2, and we thought we'd have a go at that one because Zach mentions me. He doesn't mention you. What's that about?
I don't mind.
He mentioned me. He mentioned me, and he mentioned Jeff Gilbert. G'day, Jeff of Talking Torah.
Yeah, well done, Jeff, for getting a mention.
Yeah. Someone's doing something wrong.
I know.
You're not putting in the hours, Jason. That's
I know,
why.
that's exactly what it is. Okay.
Anyway, I was mentioned, and Jeff was mentioned as someone who is anti-missionary, drawing so many people away from Yeshua, dividing the fellowships, saying it's all made up, and Yeshua never existed. That's according to Zach. So I was pretty chuffed about that. And Zach also said that apologetics are his bread and butter. And so what we thought we would do is give 119 guy a rest. Sorry, guy, but we're going to give you a break.
Steve, isn't it? Sorry, Steve.
No, I think it's John, isn't it, John?
Crap. All right, okay. Sorry, John. Oh, yeah, Guy. Guy's better. Sorry, Guy.
Sorry, 119 guy. And what we thought, because apologetics is Zach's bread and butter, we'd go through his video and see how convincing it is. That's fair enough, isn't it?
Yeah. You know that the phrase bread and butter is actually generally your fallback, the fallback way that you make a living. So, you might be a great architect, but if all that falls through, you can feed your family by building walls. That's your bread and butter. That's what it means.
So, okay.
So he should technically be feeding his family off apologetics.
Well, he's not because he said he's not making any money out of it, and maybe we'll see why.
The reason I wanted to point that out is that it's not unusual in Christian forums to see people using phrases in a way that they're totally not meant to be used and not in context. Do you
know where Zach does make his bread and butter? I think, and sorry if I get you wrong here, Zach, but it is my understanding that Zach is deep in the Ozark Mountains, which is just grand, and he's off the grid. He's one of these do-it-yourself guys, off the grid, got the whole lifestyle going on, which I really, really respect. And as one who went as far as raising my own milk and meat and eggs and vegetables and all of those ones, would love to be in Zach's position, but I think that's what he does, right?
Yeah, he went out and started to live in the wild. I mean, not as a savage, but yeah, you're right. Everything that he can get off the land, I think he tries to get off the land,
and that's his bread and butter.
That's his bread and butter, literally.
Literally. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Okay.
So Zach. Now, what I did is because I started making notes, right? And in my making of notes, I just ended up. It was so amusing to me that I wrote a whole transcript of his video.
Yeah, hats off for that. That wasn't an easy thing to do. I was really, when you said I've written some notes, I thought, okay, and that's like everything. I'm very impressed.
Well, I mean, it was. I couldn't help myself because it was so much fun, and so what I thought we would do is just run by that and weigh up his arguments, because it's, according to Zach, it's his thing, right?
Right. I'm just going to preface it by saying that the video itself is called "Is Yeshua God?" Part 2. And at the beginning, he deals with that topic, and then he goes on to some more, he calls them anti-missionary statements afterwards. So the first thing we're going to be doing is looking at the "Is Yeshua God?" argument that he puts forward, or the answer that he puts forward to that.
All right. Now, this is what he says. I'm gonna tell you what he says, and I want your opinion as to whether you're convinced. If you're going to go down to St. Patrick's and get baptized. All right, are you ready?
Okay.
It begins this way: Is Yeshua God? All right, that's his question. His answer, he continues, no.
Awesome. We're on the
Done.
same side.
All right.
Okay. Okay.
Now, it does sort of go back and forth, and I just bear with me. So he begins with no, and if it had switched off there, we'd all agree, Zach, and we could have gone home, and that would have been good. But you don't stop there. So you say, "Is Yeshua God?" No, he is the Son of God. He is of his loins, God's loins. So it is totally logic to say he is God, because he is of the Father, just like I am of my earthly father, Zach says. Zach continues, I am of my earthly father in the flesh. I am of his flesh. And then he says, it's not that hard of a concept to understand, but people today, they just, anyway, we're taking stupid sandwiches. All right, now that's a pretty strong argument.
Can I just ask you a couple of questions? If we go just to the Tanakh, aren't there instances where that men are the sons of God? Isn't that like there's a
You know what? That's a really, really good question. And the answer is yes.
Okay, and isn't it also, because I know we've got a lot to get through, we can't hang on much of this too long. Isn't it also true that God doesn't have a physical body?
That is the general understanding of Judaism.
So
that God does not have a now. To be fair to Zach, there are some verses in Ezekiel chapter 1 and Ezekiel chapter 8, where Ezekiel seems to mention that God has, well, not that he has loins. I'll tell you exactly what it says. This is, let me see, Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 27. Oh, we're going to go down so many rabbit holes, and I want to make this really fast. But in verse 27, it says, from what seemed to be his loins up, I saw a gleam like amber, what seemed to be, with what looked like fire enclosing it all around. What seemed to be from his loins down, I also saw what looked like there was a brilliant light all around him. And you can read the rest of it in Ezekiel chapter 1. But what Ezekiel's really seeing is a vision. And there's a lot of usage of phrases like as it were, or like, and seems to be. And it's kind of, he's trying to make sense of it. And he gives these kind of measurements.
Because after Moses, no prophet saw God as
right.
God. They saw him through a filter, through a representation, and then they were speaking to their people in a way that they would understand. It's worth mentioning that God also has long nostrils. He has a mighty arm. He has all these things they're not actual physical representations; they're analogies. Because he goes on to say that Jesus is, so as he is the flesh of his father, that makes him his father. Jesus is the flesh of his father, but God doesn't have any flesh. It's kind of a weird argument. Well, it's not even. I don't think it's really an argument at all. You have to believe in the New Testament for that to make any sense to you. It's not a Tanakh argument.
Then he caps it off with the stupid sandwiches, and I don't know that we can. There's not really. You can't do much with that, and I don't have an argument against stupid sandwiches, do you?
No, and
he's got us there.
To be honest, it's a little bit unfair to say that because someone's got an argument against what he's arguing, then they're taking stupid sandwiches. I would have liked. You know what he didn't do in any of those verses or any of those arguments? He didn't give any Tanakh representation for his point of view.
No, but he's got stupid sandwiches, and I couldn't, I went through my book,
right?
Tovia's book, Let's Get Biblical, Why Doesn't Judaism Accept the Christian Messiah? And you look in the back, in the index, and you look up stupid sandwiches, and there's nothing there. And he's got us. No rebuttal. That's pretty good.
So he goes on, doesn't he, to prove that Jesus is God, even though he said at the beginning he wasn't. He goes on to prove with John.
He says that he's not, and he says he is, and he says he kind of is like I am my Father. So it's a bit hard, but stupid sandwiches. He goes on to say he quotes 2 John, and this is the key verse that he uses. 2 John chapter 1, verse, well, it's only one chapter in John, verses 9 and 10. It says, whoever transgresses and does not abide in the doctrine of Christ does not have God. He who abides in the doctrine of Christ has both. Now, I want everyone to remember that word, both, because there are three words that is used a lot, both and also. Just keep that in the back of your mind, both and also. Both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your house nor greet him. Now he combines that, or he connects it rather, to, now that was John talking, he combines it to the Gospel of John, where Jesus is apparently talking. Jesus answered them and says, this is John 7:16, my doctrine is not mine, but his who sent me. Right, and we're to understand that God sent Jesus. Then he connects that to Proverbs.
Or that God sent himself.
Well, was that still out of? I'm not. I mean, based on the previous stupid sandwiches, I'm not too sure if we can understand that Zach is saying that Jesus is God, or if he's. I'm still allowed to lunch with my stupid sandwiches on that one, as far as Zach's concerned. But then he connects it with Proverbs chapter 4, verse 2, which is Solomon speaking to his children. For I give you good doctrine; do not forsake my instruction.
I just want to jump in quickly with that word "law" at the end of what people are probably reading in their Christian Bible. Law, Torah, instruction. First of all, the Torah in itself is full of hundreds of Torahs, instructions, and when we read that, it says instruction, or guidance would be another good one too. But you're absolutely right. That's Solomon to his children. That's not God speaking to the people. Proverbs is one of the few books where we can say this isn't divine instruction from the Creator, other than the fact that he used Solomon to be wise to the people. Then you could say, yeah, it's from God, but this isn't God speaking. This isn't a prophet speaking. This is Solomon.
Then he goes to, but what he's trying to say is that he's taking this as God saying to us, for I give you good doctrine, because it's got the word doctrine there, which is gold in Christianity. You find your connections with similar words and phrases and so on and so forth. Do not forsake my instruction, or do not forsake my law, or anyway, so that's what he does. Now he jumps the fence onto our side, right, and starts quoting Deuteronomy chapter 13. Do you want to read that, verses 1 to 3?
Yeah, sure. And if you're listening at home, pay super attention to this, because this is the benchmark for the rest of the show, pretty much.
This is.
If there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder come to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods, which you have not known, and let us serve them, and you shall not listen to the words of this prophet or dreamer of dreams. For the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God, and with all your heart and with all your soul. So I go on?
Oh yeah, no, let's stick with that for the moment, because I think they're the key verses. Now, Zach continues from there. He says, the Father told Moses, hey, listen, tell your people that if, this is Zach's words, tell your people that if anyone comes later on and teaches something new, then I'm telling you today, you know that person is false. Zach, he says this, he continues, if anyone comes and teaches you something different than what I'm teaching you today, you know they're false. Now, at the moment, you and I are totally with Zach, right? And he even lists, a handful of people. He says Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith is the Mormon dude, right?
Right, yeah.
John Calvin. He says, John Wesley. And then he says, what's the Seventh-day Adventist Broad? That's Ellen White.
Yeah, Broad. And I'm not very, that's not very respectful, but that's just me against what he's saying. That's nothing to do with his message. But if you don't know, don't mention that. Broad, that's just a horrible way to refer to a woman.
Right, Ellen White, anyway.
It's not a speakeasy we're in. It's not 1920.
No, all these people throughout the history of Christianity, all of them throughout the history of Christianity, if they came and taught something different to the words of Moses, again, this is Zach's words, false. Right there, that's God's litmus test. Okay, now, I'm right here. I'm with him. I mean, I'm a bit, I'm stuck on the stupid sandwiches, but in this part, I'm with Zach. What do you reckon?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. Now, just when you think he's on our side, he continues. Okay. He says, what did Yeshua say? If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Okay. Now, Yeshua did say that. Jesus said that. He said, ha! Zach continues, it's not that hard of a concept, folks. It really is not, he continues. But some people get caught up in the doctrine of Christianity instead of the doctrine of Torah, meaning the Father's doctrine, that they can't decide anymore. They can't decipher these verses. They get confused. They come up with all kinds of errors. Now just let me stop for a minute. Is he saying that Yeshua is the Father by quoting that verse?
It's interesting. I would say that he is saying that Yeshua is possibly a representation, like a facsimile or a carbon copy. But there's another piece in the New Testament, and I wish I could remember the verse, where Jesus says that I am with my disciples. And when he says I am with, he says, he means it as in I'm like with, on the side of, or you're part of the same group, or you have the same opinion. Okay. And that's what it means in the Greek. It doesn't mean he is that person. He means he's representative of that person. All right,
fair enough. Okay, and maybe that's what Zach means, and maybe that is in fact what Yeshua is saying. Now, at this point, I should say, and you'll put a link at the bottom of this video. Do you remember we did a program with Rabbi Tovia Singer, and it was entitled, "Did the New Testament writers say that Jesus was God?"
Right. Yeah.
Excellent. It doesn't. I don't know that it kind of goes up against the stupid sandwiches. I think he's got us there, but it's well worth listening to, and I think it really does address this question. Put that link at the bottom. So Zach continues. He says, so if someone comes to you, like in 2 John 10, and he asks this question, is it the doctrine that Yeshua is the Son of the Father? All right, now let me just go back and read John 2:10 again, just to put this in perspective. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this doctrine, do not receive him into your household. Greet him. Okay, so Zach asks, is it the doctrine that Yeshua is the Son of the Father, or is that the doctrine, or is the doctrine the Torah? He does that. And we all pause and wait for him to tell us, but he doesn't. What are your thoughts?
If it has to be the Torah, but if it is, then it kind of shoots himself in the foot. And I'll tell you for why. So one of the most common arguments is Jesus only preached the Torah, Jesus only preached the Torah, Jesus only preached the Torah. But if we go to Matthew 5, and everyone reads Matthew 5, but only up to a point. So they go to Matthew 5 and they start with the
Sermon on the Mount, right?
Yeah, the Beatitudes and the salt and that, and then they stop. That's a good bit. However, if you start reading from 17, now remember that Zachary's just said that if someone comes to you preaching something other than what Moses taught, it's false. Now, you may have heard it said to the people long ago, and he's referencing the law that was given to the people at Sinai, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister is subject to judgment. So what he's doing there is he's saying that you may have heard that Moses has said to the people this, but I am telling you this. Now, this is definitely an addition and a change to Deuteronomy, to the Torah, which is a direct conflict of Deuteronomy 13. And he goes on, and you may have heard it said, you should not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. Again, it's direct opposition to what Moses has said. And not only that, but it's in direct opposition to what God says in Genesis 4:7. Genesis 4:7. You've got the Cain and Abel situation where Cain is sitting there contemplating murder in his heart. And God says, you can stop now. He doesn't say you can stop now and you'll still receive judgment. He says you can stop. But on and on again, we've got oaths, an eye for an eye, and loving your enemy, and divorce. Anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. That's what Moses said. But I tell you that anyone divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her a victim of adultery. That's his view on it. And he preaches his view, and to a big audience. I mean, we've just had the Beatitudes. There were lots of people there. So if anyone comes to you and gives you a Torah that is not the Torah of Moses, you have to accept him as a false prophet. And this is an exact example of that happening.
Very good. And I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people have said to me in the past, what about all the miracles that he did? And we see in Deuteronomy 13, which you're referencing again, that miracles count for nothing.
No, in fact,
they validate nothing.
Yeah, that should make you more aware that something's going on that you should pay attention to, rather than just sit back and go, and wow, look at the amazing things he did. You should be asking, how can he make those amazing things happen? Because we've got in Isaiah 45, God says, I am good and evil, I am light and dark. So there may be a reason that God's testing you. And Jesus may have been one of those tests.
Well, according to Deuteronomy 13. So now Zach goes on. He says, he doesn't answer that question. He goes, I tell people, this is great, bouncing off Deuteronomy 13. He says, I tell people, for us to have a basis of fellowship, you've got to have two things, right? You've got to believe in Torah and understand the Torah is valid for today, because Torah shows us what sin is, and if we don't know what sin is, then we can't turn back to the Father. It's very important, repentance, Zach says, but Zach continues, but also, and here we are, again, just going back to Deuteronomy 13, read it again, two things, and also, he keeps using these words, but also, you've got to understand who came to bring us back. He says this in reference to Jesus. Now, right at this point, I got to read. He's saying who came to bring us back. He's talking about you got to know the Torah for repentance. That's important. But also you got to know who came to bring us back. Well, what does the Tanakh say? If we go to Psalm chapter 19, verse 7, it says the Torah of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Torah of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The Torah of the Lord is perfect, turning the soul. But also,
can I just ask as well? You got to understand who came to bring us back. Who's the us in that sentence?
Well, you know what he goes on to say. The adult. Now you got to help me out here. The adult. This is what he. Okay, this is Zach again. The adulterous bride into the arms of the Father. Also, there's that word again, being the arms of the Son. Jason, Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 30. Do you have it in front of you?
Deuteronomy 22:30. A man shall not take his father's wife, so that he will not uncover his father's skirt. Now, that's probably not a very good...
It says, a man shall not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's bed.
A man shall not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's skirt. A man shall not take his father's bride, nor uncover the corner of his garment. Now... There's a direct reference from this way forward in the Tanakh where we have Ruth. And she says, what do I do now? And Naomi tells her what to do. And then Ruth goes to Boaz, lifts up the corner of his garment and sleeps under it. We don't know what she's doing there. We're not going to go there. But I think this is kind of a reference of what they're talking about. You would sleep under your garments. And even in the New Testament times... that would have happened. If you had a cloak, then you slept under it. And that's one of the reasons the Torah says that if a poor person owes you money, you have to give the cloak back if he's given it to you as a down payment.
That's a pledge, yeah.
So there's this shall I go into the concept of what he's talking about with the bride and the...
Well, he kind of goes on. Let me finish what he says, and I'll let you comment on it. He continues. He said, that's the whole conversation Yeshua had with Nicodemus. Do you not understand being born again? New bride, this is his words, new bride, new groom, groom resurrected, and the bride resurrected from her sins, being dead in her sins, newness of life, new bride, new groom can come together again. Now, if that's not the plot of a zombie romance movie.
A zom-rom-com.
That's a zom-rom. Have we just created a brand new genre of viewing?
I'd like to think so.
Well, you better patent that before you put this video out. That's golden. That's a zom-rom.
Zom-rom.
Let me read it again. New bride, new groom, the groom resurrected and the bride resurrected from her sins, being dead in her sins, newness of life, bride and groom can come together again. That is definitely a zombie romance movie. That's great. Oh, and he continues, and have again what the Father tried to create the first time with his people, a marriage covenant. And then he talks about, and all Christianity knows about the marriage at the supper of the Lamb and the marriage and getting back with the Son and all that sort of stuff. Now, we also did put a link underneath this video. We did do another wonderful discussion with Rabbi Tovia Singer of outreachjudaism.org, and it was called "Can Divorced Israel Return?" And that's in regards to Jeremiah 3:14. Really, really good, and would highly recommend that. Jason, what's it about? What's he talking about? It's getting confusing.
Right, so there's a premise that's put forward by a lot of Messianic churches. Jim Staley, again, we're not going to go there, but Jim Staley is famous for doing. Yeah, he did a very big video on this that was seen by a lot of people. So the concept is that the Torah says that if a man sends a woman away, he gives her a letter of divorce, and she goes off to be with another man, the original husband can't take her back. And so they project that onto Israel. And because in the Tanakh, God says that he gave Israel a letter of divorce, and then Israel went off after foreign gods, the argument is that God can't take Israel back. They humanize God to the nth degree in that. They also ignore, which we cover in Tovia's video, the fact that Israel is the bride in some verses, the son in some verses.
The son?
Yeah, there's a whole load of different representation.
But you don't hear a Messianic or a Hebrew roots Christian like Zach saying, did God marry his son? I mean, we don't confuse the two metaphors. They go with one or the other. Anyway, please continue.
So the argument is that if God dies and comes back as a new person, then he can remarry the bride, which would mean that the son was remarrying the bride of his father, which Torah, again, completely says he can't do. But what's really interesting for me is that this argument, or the argument he put at the front, and who did he send to bring us back, totally negates Jesus' own command. When Jesus says, go not unto the Gentiles, he says it over and over. He doesn't want any Gentile to be involved in his message at all. And yet the us in the statement that Zachary made is completely to Gentiles. It's completely to Gentiles.
I'm not so sure that Zach thinks that. I'll tell you why. When we get a little bit further down, he kind of confuses that, and I want your opinion on it. He continues. He says, you may be right, but he's all over the shop here. Okay, so Zach continues, quote, so for basis level, you got to understand that Torah is valid, and you got to know Yeshua is the Son. There's the and. There's the addition that you don't find in Deuteronomy 13 or anywhere before. Because you can't have the Father without the Son, he says. You can't have the Father without the Son. Jason.
So this is what when I go away, that's the Tanakh I take. It's the Art Scroll one. It's nice. It's handy. This is wall to wall, front cover to back cover, the Father and no Son. There's no Son in there at all. Unless you want to go the Exodus route where Israel is God's only begotten Son, which is fair. That's full of Israel. But there's no physical representation or hint or clue of God having some sort of child with a woman who is married to give birth to himself, for that person to then grow up and get murdered by a pagan army outside the walls of Jerusalem. Just doesn't happen. It's not in here. So yeah, you can absolutely have the Father without the Son. In fact, if you believe in the Tanakh, you can only have the Father without the Son.
Absolutely. This brings me, he says, to the missionary thing, the anti-missionary thing, Zach says. He says, where so many people are denying Yeshua, so many. It's very encouraging, Zach. Thanks for this. There's so many people denying Yeshua as being the Son of God, and that he is the one spoken of. Think of it this way. You're going to Vegas, right, Jason, right here. Let's just take a break for a second and just prepare ourselves. Zach loses the plot at this point. It's really difficult to follow him from this point on. Think of it this way. You're going to Vegas. Are you ready?
I'm
Okay,
ready.
this is what he says. We're on our way to Vegas. Wasn't there a movie? Cheech and Chong?
Oh,
Was that Vegas?
I haven't watched any of those things.
Oh, no.
I am a fan of, now, because he says he's not a gambler, and I'm not really, but I am a fan of Vegas. It's like Disneyland for adults. I love it. They do really good buffets, and there's loads of great
You've
shows.
been there, right?
I've been there a few times. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. You're a Vegas regular. Okay,
Yeah.
well then maybe you can make sense of this for me. Okay, so he says you're going to Vegas, and you can bet on anything in Vegas. Is that fair?
Yeah, if you know the right people.
Okay. They give you different odds, based on what they think is going to happen. And so what are the odds? I'm sure mathematicians have come up with this in the past, he says. What are the odds that in Vegas that over and over again, the Torah and the prophets all say that Yud Hey Vav Hey is your salvation? What are the odds, Jason?
I'd say that the as you were taking as a reference the actual content of the book. I've got a book here, right? So Dublin is full of these crazy old characters that become part of local folklore. And I got this book last week because it looks kind of funny. And it's all about this crazy old homeless people who probably had mental issues. But wall to wall through this book, you'll find that the author and authors are talking about homeless people. What are the odds? That all the
crazy bus lady is the crazy bus lady in there?
She's not, but maybe the next edition.
You need to write a chapter in that book.
What are the odds that the authors throughout the whole of this book talk about homeless people?
I know. No, it doesn't stop there. He continues. He says, what are the odds? Over and over again, the Torah and the prophets say Yud Hey Vav Hey is your salvation. And then, he says, this Messiah comes. A man comes who says he is the salvation for the world because the northern kingdom was spread into the world. Matthew 15:24. I have not come but for the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Ephraim. Now, please, people, just remember this is all Zach's words, right? Ephraim.
Yeah, if you get cut out,
don't tune in halfway and think that I'm doing this. I'm just saying, this is Zach's words. Okay. Ephraim, prophesied by Jacob to be spread and made great, meaning many, amongst all the nations of the world, and that his name would be salvation. Jason.
I would like a verse to qualify that statement.
I know. Well, you know what? That's what I thought. And I think he's referring to Genesis 48:19. And this is where Jacob is blessing the lads, Ephraim and Manasseh, right? He's blessing them. He's crossed his hands over. Joseph says, no, do it like this. And he goes, I know what I'm doing. And he blesses them. Now, I don't find anywhere where Jacob says that a Messiah will come and his name will be salvation.
Yeah, in fact, when we go back to the beginning of that statement and then what this Messiah comes, so this Messiah comes part of that statement that's completely his own opinion. There's nothing in the text that says that's going to happen. A man comes and says he is the salvation of the world because the normal king, blah, 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 Matthew 15. And again, nothing in the Tanakh that says that that's going to happen. And then when we do get down to the bit that we can roughly tie into the Tanakh from Genesis 48, he straps on a load of stuff at the end that isn't in the text. And he says, and over again, in the Torah and the prophets, I am your salvation.
And Isaiah, I wanted to read this out. Isaiah 43:11. Let me just read it. Before me there was no God formed, nor shall there be after me. Even I am the Lord, and besides me there is no Savior. Now,
it's hard to know where to go because he then takes this massive leap from me being a bricklayer to me being called bricklayer. It's just this huge leap between, and he says all Hebrew. Now, we did a video a little while ago that was a rebuttal to a 1019 video called The Messiah in Genesis 5, when we go through people's names, because they argue that every Hebrew name has a meaning, and then they instantly say that because a person is named a certain way, that's what he is. And that's the argument that Zach puts forward here about Yeshua being a shortened verse, to be fair, of salvation. So Yehoshua, when we see Joshua, isn't it interesting that Jesus isn't called Joshua in the New Testament? But yeah, so we've got Yeshua, and how that, because that means salvation, or it's a version of the word salvation in Hebrew, just the same as my friend Bob is a version of what a duck does in the water. That doesn't necessarily mean he is super buoyant. It's just that his name is Bob.
And I would venture a guess that the name wasn't unique to one individual person. It's funny, I love, and this is just a whole other conversation in of itself. We won't do this, but of course, they say that Jesus was born of a virgin. I suppose Zach believes that. That's taken from Isaiah chapter 7. And in that prophecy, it says he shall be called Emmanuel. Anyway.
And also, if Isaiah 7 is true, then Jesus was the second man born of a virgin.
If it's to be taken that way. People can look at that. You know what? We did a program on that. It'll be on a link underneath this, giving you lots of links to put underneath the video. Zach continues. All right. So Zach continues. Oh, my goodness. He says, and then this, and all the prophets are asking, how are you going to bring God's people back from all around the world where they've been scattered to? They've been conquered. How's he going to restore the ruin? Salvation, Zach says. And what comes is named salvation, for he shall save his people. You shall not call him Jesus, Zach says. That's a Greek word. It doesn't mean anything, actually. It's not. Jesus is the Greek. I hate to be picky, Zach, but it's Jesus. And I think Jesus is a Latin adaptation of Jesus. But as you mentioned, Jesus is the Greek form of the name Yeshua or Yehoshua, being Joshua. That's the transliteration. So meaning Yud He Vav He is salvation. All right. But Zach continues. But it's Yeshua, salvation, for he shall save his people. What are the odds in Vegas that would happen? And Zach says, what are the odds? It blows his mind. What are the odds that someone would make up a story, Jason? What are the odds that someone would make up a story that coincide with everything the prophet said? Now,
so 80 years after a certain person lived, they have 40 odd years to figure out how they can tie. Now, what's interesting to me is what happens at the end. They've got 40 odd years to go through the whole of the Torah and Tanakh and pull out parts to place into a story. They've 40 years to do it. So I'd say the odds are pretty high. If I picked any random book off the bookshelf now of something that happened, over 3,000 years ago, and then I picked a person who lived today, I could write a book about how the person that lived today, by being clever and cherry picking, is totally the personification of a certain other period in history. It's easy to do. But what wouldn't be easy for me to do would be to make so many mistakes or to misquote the text. A text which is universally used by Jews for the last 3,000 years from the beginning of the Tanakh, universally used and shared by Jews all around the world. They don't make a mistake. But when you try to then quote some of the passages from that, completely make a mistake. So I don't know how you can do that with 40 years of study. But
let me ask you this. What are the odds after 2,000 years of New Testament, what are the odds that along comes someone like C.S. Lewis and writes the Narnia series? What are the odds? What are the odds? And it absolutely coincides with everything in the New Testament. What are the odds? How did that happen?
I'd say it's a bazillion to one shot.
Bazillion to one. And that's what That's what Zach gives us. Finally, he answers the question, his own question. But before he gets there, he says, okay, but you got people out there like Jeff Gilbert or John Evander or some of these people out there who say it's all made up and Jesus never existed. Now, I actually never said that. Have I ever said that?
No, I was gonna bring that up, and I don't think that Jeff has, to be fair. I can't speak for him, but my understanding is that he believes he was even amalgamation or an ahistorical figure, but not necessarily responsible for everything that the New Testament says he did. Would that be what's your opinion of?
I have always, when people ask me, like, because people do ask me all the time. I had someone ring me this week and say, "Did Jesus actually exist?" We don't have any contemporary writings, historical evidence that he did actually exist.
Now, we have evidence. John the Baptist is a historical figure. Pilate is an historical figure. I think just a year ago or 2 years ago, they turned over a paving stone in Jerusalem and found Pilate's name written on the other side. And we have not conclusive but contemporary evidence that James existed.
Yes, there is a reference to James, maybe a couple of references to James. Now, James is Jesus' brother, and I kind of think that there must be a Jesus, a Yeshua figure on which this is originally based. I think there was a revolutionary chap of sorts on which the whole thing is based, and then Paul picks it up and runs with it.
The area was full over that's a 50-year period. There were messiahs popping up everywhere. People, some super aggressive, some political, and some like Jesus as we are told. We've got to remember as well, when we read through the New Testament, we're getting some, apart from when they say the Gospels were written, there's like 200 years of editing in there before it started to get sent out to the mainstream. You have to wonder, so if I was publishing a book and I was starring in that book, being the Roman Catholic Church, if I was the Roman part of that, I'd want to make sure that I came off quite good in that book. I wouldn't want to be the person responsible for murdering this person. I'd want my enemy to be responsible for that. So you have to remember when we read through it, that other people have a voice in this, and it's not just the seed of Jesus or Yeshua.
Well, Zach continues. He says, but the one that does exist in the New Testament of your Bible coincides perfectly with the salvation of the salvation the Father always promised to send. That's a bazillion to one shot, he says. Now, at this point, let's not get into examples. Let's just say that Rabbi Skobach and I, Rabbi Michael Skobach of Jews for Judaism.ca in Canada, we did the 365 series, and we went through every single prophecy, 365 of them apparently, one for every day of the week, and we checked it out to see if it was a prophecy of Yeshua. You can find that on truth2you.org.
There'll be a link under the video. Also, it's worth mentioning that your Bible coincides perfectly with the salvation the Father has always promised to send. Your Bible does. The New Testament doesn't. The Bible says that the God is your salvation, that he's the strong tower, that he's the person you should run to and turn to. Now, it doesn't say that Yodhe will cause your salvation. It says he is your salvation. Not that he's going to send your salvation, not that he's going to give birth to your salvation. He is, and that's why the prophets don't say, follow this particular man and he'll get you to God. They say, just turn to God and accept that you've made mistakes. That's kind of the whole basis of the Tanakh. The basis of the Tanakh is not that the salvation, the Father always promised to send. He's not sending salvation, he is salvation. It's two different things.
Amen. Okay, so Zach continues. This is where Zach says, apologetics is my bread and butter. Even though I don't make any money from this, he says, I love apologetics. I want people to see the error in these arguments that the anti-missionaries are bringing to you that are dividing your fellowship. Again, Zach, I'm not an anti-missionary. Can I say that?
I was going to say, yeah, can we, because I don't know actually of any of the people that we record with or talk to that are anti-missionary. They themselves are missionaries. I'm a missionary. Yeah. You're a missionary.
But at the same time, they uphold the right of someone of a differing faith to evangelize their faith.
Yes, free speech.
It's absolutely free speech, and they uphold that. All they're saying, and what we're saying is, we're just using our right and responding. We're just responding. We're saying, okay, so this is what Zach thinks, this is what we think, and that's just fair, Zach. We're happy for you to do this, and we're quite happy to respond. So I wouldn't say that I'm an anti-missionary, and I certainly didn't say some of those things that you said I said. Now, he goes on, they'll say, well, now, okay, man, this really starts to freak me out. Zach says, they'll say, well, human sacrifice is not allowed in the Torah. Then he goes, wrong answer. Now, should I be scared, Jason?
I'm really waiting to find out what his. I'm sure he's going to go the Abraham and Isaac. I'm sure he's going to go the Abraham and Isaac route.
I don't know. He doesn't go anywhere. He just goes wrong answer. Apparently suggesting that human sacrifice is allowed in the Torah, and he said, "I can show you." And he said, "There are some great people out there who are showing both." Showing you that man can atone for the sins of man, both Old and New Testament folks. And then he has a little bit of a Santa Claus manifestation. He goes, oh, like this. And that's one of the big ones, he says, that these guys bring all the time. What's he saying there?
Well, it's confusing. If he is saying that there are arguments in the Torah that a man can atone for another man's sin,
via human sacrifice.
Why do we need Jesus?
I don't know, but it seems to me that he's saying that the Tanakh condones human sacrifice.
Yeah, I don't...
Because if we're saying, well, human sacrifice is not allowed in the Torah, in fact, God refers to it as an abomination, and he says, Zach's saying, wrong answer, I can show you. He doesn't actually show us, but this is his response. So that kind of freaks me out a little bit.
Outside of the human sacrifice arena, there are instances where a man can pray or do an action that will... Now, when I use the word save, I have to be very careful because the Christian's going to hear that and it thinks like, instant key to heaven. But that can remove the punishment of their actions from them. You've got the example of when Aaron runs out and burns the incense and the plague stops. And then you have where we're praying for... Abraham is praying for Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's fighting God to save the people that live in that. So there's an argument that sin can be removed, but all that argument does is it detracts from the importance of Jesus. Like Yom Kippur, the goat that went for sin didn't die, detracts from the argument that you need Jesus. So I'm curious to know what his human sacrifice example is, because other than the Abraham version, in which he didn't die, that was the test. The test is to see whether he'd go through with it, and he didn't, and therefore it's not necessary. So I'm curious to see where he goes with that.
Well, if anything, that story says that it makes this distinct point that human sacrifice is not required. That story is what it does for us. Now, Zach continues. Zach says, and in the same way, Yeshua can't be the Son of God because he didn't do this or he didn't do that, blah, blah, blah. What are the odds? What are the odds? Now, I think he's got us there as well.
You made a good point here about the lottery ticket. Do you want to...
The lottery ticket? Well, all I'm going to say is I went back through my book and I couldn't find blah, blah, blah. And I couldn't find, what are the odds? And so that's pretty strong apologetics, don't you think?
It is. So you made the point to me that what the New Testament does is it has a lottery ticket in its pocket that it runs to the store to try and get a payout from. But the store owner, who is the Tanakh, says, yeah, but you wrote down all those numbers after you've heard them called out on the lottery program. So the New Testament is the lottery ticket that a person has written the numbers onto after they've heard the results come out. That's what's happening here. And in that instance, your odds of winning, no, that's not fair. Your odds of having the right numbers are 1-to-1. Like, your odds are good. But of it being the winning ticket, it's never going to win because it's the amalgamation of other
bazillion to one.
Yeah, it's a bazillion to one.
All right, so this is his last ditch effort to throw out some apologetics to us. This one, that Yeshua can't be the Son of God because he didn't do this, he didn't do that, blah, 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 blah. What are the odds? What are the odds? The next one is, and there are so many people from Orthodox, like there's some sort of a trophy, so many people from Orthodox that are discovering that Yeshua is in fact the Messiah spoken of by the prophet over and over again. He was the promised salvation.
I think what got my back up the most about that is the fact he said from Orthodox. He couldn't even be bothered to say from Orthodoxy or from Orthodox Judaism, because there's a Greek Orthodox Church, there's a Russian Orthodox Church. I mean, but he assumes that the people watching will instantly think Jew when he says Orthodox. And that, for me, is a little bit worrying. But the interesting argument here is, are there people from Orthodoxy discovering that Yeshua is the Messiah? I would say that there are a few people who come from Orthodox families, but not religious people. I haven't ever met a person who was brought up in a religious household who got to the age of 23 and then said to themselves, oh, you know what? Everything I've learnt my whole life has led me to Jesus. It just hasn't happened.
But even if it does happen, let's say it happens en masse. Let's say he's right, and heaps of religious Jews, religious Orthodox Jews, are turning to Yeshua as their Messiah. Is that
wrong?
Is that a validation of their faith? Is that something? I mean, instead of going to the text, I mean, is it more a validation of saying, well, if there are Orthodox people turning to Yeshua, then it must be true?
And what's interesting here is he's using the fact that a person is an Orthodox Jew as a testament to how intelligent they are in regards to making their faith choice. Right? He's saying that these are Orthodox people. They know what they're talking about. If that's the case.
There's far more Orthodox that,
right.
that are sticking with Moses than those that are turning to Jesus. Shouldn't, anyway, all right. Now, this is the last one. This is the icing on the cake for Zach. He said, I'm going to leave you with this. He says, check this out. He says, like, this is some sort of gold. The New Testament said, he basically says, the New Testament said that Thomas said that Jesus was God. And he reads that little bit out of John chapter 20, where Jesus is supposedly saying to Thomas, stick your fingers in all my holes. Check it out. And Thomas says, oh, you are my Lord and my God. And so Zach's basically saying, it's true because the New Testament says so. And that's a little bit of icing sugar on top of his cake.
Yeah, there's the whole napkin argument again that we brought up before. That I believe in this napkin because of what it says on this napkin. That's the napkin argument. I'll have a little logo up for that. I've got a little meme I quite like.
And Tovia does address this one in his book. And let me just do an ad. Again, Let's Get Biblical by Rabbi Tovia Singer. Why doesn't Judaism accept the Christian Messiah? This is just volume 1, people, but there's volume 2 as well. And I highly recommend these books.
And can I say as well, if you are watching this and you're a Christian and you're in Zachary's camp, which is fine, I mean, he does do some good videos. Now, if you were in his camp and you've got this far in, because this is probably a 40-minute video, first, well done for sticking through to the end. And secondly, Tovia's book isn't about Tovia's opinion. And I think for the most part, when we offer argument, we try not to make it our opinion either. We're trying to find out whether or not it's pinpointed in the text, and Tovia makes a great job of making sure that everything he says is backed up textually. So if you just want to find out more about your Bible, regardless of the Jesus argument, you're going to find that the 2 books that Tovia released are going to massively increase your understanding of the Tanakh and how it works.
There won't be any argument against stupid sandwiches. We can't help you there. But in the end, Jason, Zach's question, is Yeshua God? Did he answer it? What do you reckon?
I think he tried to... you know what he tried to do? He tried to make the New Testament answer the question.
And that's the way he leaves it. He says Jesus is God because the New Testament says so, and that's the way he finishes it. All right. So that's Zach. So, Zach, thank you for mentioning me. Thanks for mentioning Jeff. G'day again to Jeff of TalkingTorah.org, I think it is. And next time, mention Jason.
Yeah, or not, if you think I'm not working hard enough. Can I just say as well?
Yeah.
Now, I understand that there are some people, I'm going to offend somebody right now. There are some people to whom faith is super important to them, and they might not be interested in looking at argument. They might not be interested in reading the Old Testament. They have their faith in Jesus, and because Jesus is in the New Testament, by default, they trust the New Testament, and that's fine. They believe in the New Testament, and that's absolutely fine. Now, one of the things that Zach said is that people like you are leading people away from their belief in Yeshua and in the New Testament. All that says is that he believes people have a faith that's so weak that they can watch a few videos and they'll bag up any faith they had in Jesus and throw that away and replace it with this new faith. So he's saying one of two things. Either your argument is strong or people are weak. And I think that's a little bit disparaging. For most people who make that choice to test, they make a choice to test Jesus, it's super difficult for them to do. It fills you with panic and worry and angst. Then you have to ask your family a little bit about that, and that can lead to ostracization, and you're not being able to see your grandkids anymore, or your husband or wife leaving you. And then you've got the bigger community, especially if you live in Texas or somewhere, when you start getting looks and phone calls and your Facebook page gets decimated. It's not an easy choice. You can't just watch somebody on a video and then say, oh, you know what, I think they're right, unless the argument is valid and you go and check that out for yourself. And it's a little bit, it's belittling to people to say that they're so weak and small. And if their faith in Jesus was that weak and small, then maybe they did the right thing in checking it out. It's not fair for him to call everybody that makes the choice to move on because of them educating themselves small and dumb. It's just not right. Cool. All right. Thanks for watching, everyone at home. Thanks you, Johnny, for your time.
Thanks, Zach.
And thank you, Zach. Yeah, if you guys at home have something you'd like us to look at that you've seen a video. I'm going to suggest that's not your best work.
No.
So if you guys at home have watched a video from somebody you'd like us to look at the message, that might be 119 or another Zach video, or First Fruits of Zion, which actually someone brought up during the week and I'm kind of interested in looking at. FFOZ. I know
Leave it in the comments.
Yeah, leave it in the comments, let us know, and we'll be back to you very soon.